So thank you for being here, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to today's conference on cooperative threat and risk reduction in a new global context. Bonjour, bienvenue tout le monde. My name is Teddy Sami. I'm the director of the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs, also known as NIPSIA, here at Carleton University. Our school is located on the 5th floor of this building, so during the day, if you want to roam around and see what the school looks like, I invite you to go upstairs to the 5th floor. We're delighted that you can join us this morning. We have a lot of people who've registered, so I'm hoping more people will join us during the day. There's always a bit of traffic in the morning, so people get stuck at the entrance. So hopefully we'll have more people coming in. As is the custom here at Carleton University, I'd like to first acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank a few people who are here. Professor Michael Manulak, a colleague of mine, who's been leading today's event. Of course, a big thank you to all our partners for their support. The Stimson Center, Brian Finlay is here, former NIPSIA graduate. For the younger students who are in the room, you should talk to him. He was here 25 years ago and graduated from the program. I want to thank Global Affairs Canada for their support, as well as the Canadian Defense and Security Network, which is led by another colleague of mine, Professor Steve Seidman, who's also the holder of the Barton Chair in International Affairs. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank the admin staff at NIPSIA, in particular my assistant Alison Fitch, Anne Morneau, who's our comms coordinator. She was here earlier. She will probably come back later, and Colleen Cornelson, our school administrator, for the amazing administrative support that they provide to us, and in particular the last few weeks leading to today's event. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Michael and Brian for them to say a few words. So I wish you all a great conference, and I'll be here throughout the day if you want to chat. Thanks.
Director, thank you so much for the introduction and for hosting today as well. It's such a pleasure to be back. As you mentioned, it was 25 years ago to the year that I left Norman Paterson, and for the students in the room, some of your professors now were my professors then, believe it or not. You were in high school probably, Director, at that time, right? You were in high school. I'm really grateful to the school for helping us to put this on, but also to, in truth, setting me up for a career in international affairs. And I would love to talk to some of the students over the course of the day about where your careers may take you. For much of my time, since graduating from Carleton here, I have built a career in the United States, in Washington at a DC-based think tank where I am now, called the Stimson Center. We focus on issues of international security and prosperity, but do so in a really practical and pragmatic way. And although weapons of mass destruction are not the sole remit or singular focus of our work, it is the focus of our discussion over the course of the day here today. And I think it is telling that we can focus on really the remarkable and I think unsung investments that the Canadian people have made through Global Affairs Canada to the abatement of the threat of weapons of mass destruction. As I say, although my career started here in Canada, I have lived and worked in Washington for most of my professional career. And the question that I'm asked most often is, what's the difference between Americans and Canadians? And for me, the answer is simple. Americans are spectacularly good at patting themselves on the back. And now that sounds like a pejorative comment, but it is not. In the case of these programs, for instance, Canada's investments through the Global Partnership have been both significant and are exceptionally well understood by countries around the world, except here in Canada. And it's really quite remarkable to me that most Canadians really don't even know that these programs exist, despite the significant investments that are being made in these programs. It's not the case in the United States, where these programs are much better known and I think therefore appreciated, particularly at the policy level. And we're going to hear a little later in the day from Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins. She is the Undersecretary of State in the United States. And I think her remarks will help us sort of better situate the importance that these programs have, not just here in Canada, but really globally. So a big thanks, Michael, especially to you for helping to make this happen. I look forward to the rest of the conversation today.
Well, thanks, Brian. Great to have you back at the school. Welcome to all of you. Special welcome to the students in my two seminars, Disarmament, Arms Control, and Non-Proliferation, for whom this is week 5 of their seminar. So if you see people taking more copious notes than perhaps some of the others in the audience, it's probably them, and also the students in my Diplomacy and Foreign Policy seminar. Really great to have you, and great to have so many here to look at the global partnership. The global partnership against weapons and materials, against the spread of weapons and materials of mass destruction is, I think, one of the most important achievements of the G7, G8 process in the international security sphere. Almost everywhere, and Trevor will remind us where there's been a major accomplishment and in this space, you see the fingerprints of the global partnership there. But it's not time to rest on their laurels. The world that we inhabit today is a very different world. It's a very different world in 2023 than it was in 2002 when Canada hosted the Kananaskis Summit and helped launch the global partnership process. And so this is part of the reason why today, with Brian's instigation and Trevor and GAC's Global Affairs Canada's support, we wanted to put the global partnership on the agenda, to think through some of the institutional mechanisms, and really to ask big questions about whether how the global partnership can continue to adapt to the changed and rapidly changing global context. We see real changes in the technological profile. If you look at the recent nuclear index of the Nuclear Threat Initiative, we're seeing real changes in the nuclear security environment, most of them, not all of them, encouraging. And so some real thoughts as to whether and where the trajectory of the global partnership will be, whether some institutional modifications, whether we have the right countries around the table in every instance, whether there are partnerships and collaborations with other institutions that work in parallel spaces like the Proliferation Security Initiative, whether there might be tighter collaboration that we can use these different mechanisms to act more definitively, whether there are changes to the partnership itself, whether there might be some means of greater centralization, perhaps, to ensure a greater unification of effort among all the countries that are members of the partnership. All of these are the types of questions that we're hoping to put on the table as we think through the continued role of the global partnership going forward. So, really looking forward to the presentations and to the panels that we're going to have today. And thank you all for being here. I'll just very briefly introduce our first speaker. We're really lucky today to have Cindy Termorshuizen, the Associate Deputy Minister at Global Affairs Canada, also Canada's G7 Sherpa. She's somebody with extensive experience in the international security space, and so she really brings a great perspective on the global partnership. She's seen the program, she understands the program, the linkages with the policy dimensions of Global Affairs Canada. So she's really able to put, I think, a lot of these questions in context and really provoke us to think about the global partnership as we go forward. So welcome to Nitsia, and also a Carleton alum. So delighted to also have her back at the school and at Carleton. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Ambassador Jenkins, Professor Maniluk, Mr. Finley, distinguished guests. I'm really delighted to be here this morning for this important event. As our colleagues just mentioned, I am a Carleton grad, and you're probably asking, why aren't you a NIPSIA grad? So I'm a political science grad, master's from that program. And back in those days, there was no PhD program at NIPSIA. And so I still thought I might pursue academia. And so the political science program it was. But we are very fortunate at Global Affairs Canada to have numerous graduates from the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs. And we're just delighted to be able to partner with you today for this important event. So let me say a thank you also to the Henry L. Stimson Center and Brian for your partnership in this really important event. As I think you will hear throughout the course of the day, Stimson has also been a tremendous partner for the Weapons Threat Reduction Program at Global Affairs Canada. So long and important relationship. I'm really pleased that my colleague Bonnie Jenkins was able to make the trip from Washington amid her obligations as Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security. Bonnie, your presence here today is, I think, a testament to the close alignment and collaboration between Canada and the United States when it comes to cooperative threat reduction. We are fortunate to have someone of your depth of expertise contributing to today's proceedings. And if any of you have not taken the chance to read Dr. Jenkins' bio, I would encourage you to do so. It will intimidate you, but also impress you with her extraordinary depth of knowledge on these matters that we'll be discussing today. And of course, my thanks to all the participants for being here. I see some diplomatic colleagues in the audience, but also some students. You are our future policy leaders, and so it's really important that you're here with us today. I have no doubt that today's discussion will be educational, but let me be really clear. This is not just an academic matter. Weapons of mass destruction and threat reduction efforts to prevent their proliferation by states and terrorists is a deadly serious business. Weapons of mass destruction is a catch-all term. It encapsulates the horrors of chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons and related materials. They were designed to do what their name implies, to kill and devastate on a massive level, indiscriminately, unforgivingly, and horrifically. You have a sense from documentaries, your studies, watching Chernobyl, or Oppenheimer recently, of the cataclysm that nuclear weapons and their radioactive components can unleash. The detonation of a nuclear bomb against a civilian target would mean hellfire and incineration for those at ground zero. Slower, but near certain death for those outside the immediate blast zone, and a legacy of poisoned earth for decades to follow. Chemical weapons are the most proliferated and widely used weapons of mass destruction, and they are no less terrifying. In April 1915, at the Second Battle of Ypres, Canadian soldiers were amongst the first to fall victim to these odious weapons when German forces unleashed chlorine gas. It killed and maimed thousands. In the words of a Canadian survivor, "It is impossible for me to give a real idea of the terror and horror spread among us by this filthy, loathsome pestilence." And more than a century later, the chemical weapon threat survives, and new and ever more deadly variants of these weapons have been designed to kill even more efficiently. Biological weapons harness humanity's oldest and most persistent killer, disease. Though stigmatized as, quote, repugnant to the conscience of mankind, unquote, in the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention, the unrivaled killing power of disease and the ever-increasing ability of scientists to manipulate and program bacteria and viruses is an enticing lure for certain states and terrorist organizations. The recent pandemic of COVID-19 has only exacerbated the threat because its unparalleled global impacts have not gone unnoticed by those who wish to enhance their capacity to inflict great harm. And so the challenges posed by weapons of mass destruction are amplified in times of global turmoil, such as those we find ourselves in now. Technological advances are driving rapid change in the threat landscape, while agreements designed to control such weapons are weakening. Some states are increasing nuclear arsenals, and investing in novel capabilities. Russia's war in Ukraine has featured nuclear saber rattling, reckless attacks near a nuclear power facility, a disinformation campaign alleging biological weapons development in Ukraine by the United States, and chemical weapons posturing that raises the prospect of false flag attacks. State-based WMD threats are many, but so too are those posed by extremists. If terrorists are prepared, as they have proven to be, to fly commercial aircraft into buildings and to use whatever conventional weapons they can lay their hands on to carry out attacks, we have to accept that they would not hesitate to use CBRN weapons if the opportunity presented. They have done so in the past and likely will aim to do so again in the future. Okay, that was pretty depressing, right? Fortunately, that is not the end of the story. So I want to turn the page and focus on what I think is the good news, and what should rightfully be acknowledged as one of the most successful contributions to international security in recent times, the G7-led global partnership against the spread of weapons and materials of mass destruction. When it comes to WMD cooperative threat reduction, unified effort and coordinated action are no less important today than they were more than 2 decades ago, when Canada and the United States came together in the wake of the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, to conceive and launch the Global Partnership. When the Global Partnership, or GP, as you'll hear it called, was launched at the G8 summit in Kananaskis during Canada's presidency, there were those who questioned whether it could meet its ambitious target of $20 billion over 10 years, and who doubted that it would be able to make meaningful, sustained actions to prevent terrorists and those that harbor them from acquiring weapons and materials of mass destruction. Well, more than 21 years later, we can say with confidence that the skeptics have been proven wrong. The Global Partnership community, which has grown to include 30 countries and the European Union, has delivered more than $25 billion in concrete and measurable programming to mitigate, and in some cases eliminate entirely, a wide array of WMD challenges. For more than 2 decades, whenever these threats have presented themselves, be it nuclear proliferation by Iran or North Korea, chemical weapons use in Syria, or the spread of deadly pathogens in West Africa, the Global Partnership has been there. As the Global Partnership was born in Canada, our government has always felt a special responsibility to shepherd and uphold this unique security mechanism. This is why my department's Weapons Threat Reduction Program, which implements Canada's Global Partnership collaboration, has delivered nearly $1.7 billion in tangible programming to date. And on a personal note, as my colleagues have mentioned, I had the great fortune of overseeing the efforts of the Weapons Threat Reduction Program in a previous job. And I'm very glad to see actually that a lot of my colleagues from the Weapons Threat Reduction Program are here in the audience today. Thank you for everything you do and continue to do. And so through that role and subsequent roles, I have acquired a strong appreciation for the unique contributions, capabilities, and foresight of this specialized program. And as Brian says, though it garners modest public attention, the WTRP has been leading from the front since Kananaskis in the development and execution of high-impact projects to mitigate all manner of CBRN threat. These efforts are undertaken in the closest collaboration with other members of the Global Partnership, most notably the United States and the United Kingdom. Together with the UK and US, we built a chemical weapons destruction facility in Russia, which eliminated some 5,500 tons of deadly nerve agents stored in more than 1.9 million munitions. Later, we came together to destroy the declared chemical weapons stock of both Libya and Syria. And we continue to bolster the investigative capabilities of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons to ensure that perpetrators of chemical weapon attacks are identified and held to account. Canada and the United States have also worked to enhance nuclear and radiological security globally, including a close partnership with the Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration. Together, we have delivered 22 cooperative threat reduction projects across a broad spectrum of threat vectors, including removal of highly enriched uranium from reactors in Vietnam and Mexico, strengthening radiological source security in Kazakhstan, and building capacities in Central Asia and Ukraine to prevent the illicit trafficking of these materials. And to address a wide array of biological threats, we have spearheaded the creation of the Global Partnership's biosecurity deliverables, the establishment of the Signature Initiative to mitigate biological threats in Africa, and the strengthening of mechanisms at Interpol and the World Health Organization to respond to and investigate the deliberate use of disease as a weapon. In sum, the GP has an incontestable record of getting hard things done. Though I have spent a few minutes looking back, let me assure you that the Government of Canada's cooperative threat reduction efforts are also always looking forward. We have a team of dedicated experts who are constantly surveying the global WMD threat landscape and identifying innovative ways to prevent terrorists and states of proliferation concern from acquiring these most horrific weapons. And while we wish that WMD threats were transient, we know that they are here to stay. In this regard, so too is Canada's Weapons Threat Reduction Program. In 2018, the WTRP was renewed on an indefinite basis and was granted ongoing funding, a recognition by our government of the impressive results achieved by the program and the continued imperative of identifying and mitigating WMD threats wherever and whenever they present. Canada will assume the G7 presidency and thus the chair of the Global Partnership in 2025. We are committed to ensuring that the GP remains adaptable and equipped to address ever-evolving threats and to explore greater collaboration globally. We are quick to acknowledge that the success, both past and future, of the program is closely tied to our outstanding partnerships and the wisdom, guidance, and support provided by our international collaborators. In this regard, let me formally extend sincere gratitude to all programming partners who are here today. I want to say a special thanks to you, Brian, and to the Stimson Center. You have been one of our most reliable and effective partners for many years, both in devising and delivering quality threat reduction programming and in undertaking cutting-edge research and analysis on some of the world's greatest security challenges. In closing, let me stress that while we are very proud of the accomplishments of the GP and of Canada's Weapons Threat Reduction Program, we recognize that it isn't enough. Our adversaries with WMD aspirations will not rest, and therefore neither can we. In this regard, I appeal to all of you here today. Give us your ideas, your comments, your critiques. What are the emerging WMD threat vectors that demand increased GP focus? What more can and should the Global Partnership and the Weapons Threat Reduction Program do to prevent terrorists and those who harbor them from acquiring and using weapons and materials of mass destruction? And how, as a collective of committed countries under the G7 leadership, can we work better together and leverage the extraordinary strengths and capabilities of our member governments, international organizations, and civil society? And finally, as Brian and Michael have alluded, how can we do a better job of telling the story of the global partnership and its cooperative threat reduction efforts to a broader audience? After all, in these tough times, we could all use a little bit more good news and a reason for optimism. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you all a very stimulating and productive day. To stay? Yeah, happy to.
Do we have a few minutes, 10 or 15 minutes? If anybody has any questions, we have microphones, I think, set up on either side. So just come to the microphone, perhaps introduce yourself, and we can have some question and answer.
This was the one I was worried about.
Madam Associate Deputy Ministers, thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to see you again. I wonder if you could talk a little bit. You were, as you mentioned in your in your remarks, you have spent some time in a lot of different places. You've been in Beijing. You've been across your career with Global Affairs Canada, but you also oversaw some of the WTRP programs. I wonder if you look back to your time overseeing those programs, what were some of the big, sort of, in your view, kind of wins that the program achieved? What were the big accomplishments that you really kind of took pride in as a leader in the ministry? You know, if there are just one or two examples of programming that stick in your mind,
Sure.
the contributions that Canada has made internationally.
Well, great question. My mind immediately turns to the work that we did with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons on accountability with respect to chemical weapons use in Syria. I think one of the things that worries me with respect to the use of these kinds of weapons is impunity. And I think the work that we did with the OPCW to ensure that there was no impunity for Syria in the use of chemical weapons was so important. It doesn't mean that we took away the threat, but we did shine a light on these activities and tried to ensure that they were noticed and that there was clarity about who did them and that there were consequences to those. So I would say that's one that kind of happened in part during my time as Director General responsible for this program, and it really stuck with me. The other thing that I was really struck by was actually the work that we have been doing in Southeast Asia, in Africa in particular, on the biological side, and developing lab capabilities to enable countries that actually face very significant issues with communicable disease to build up their capabilities to be able to identify and understand disease in their own countries. And I think one of the exciting things was that when COVID hit, a lot of these capabilities proved to be multi-purpose and enabled these countries to respond more effectively to a situation that wasn't a deliberate disease event by a threat actor, but was a serious threat to the health and security of people in those countries. So I think those capabilities, even though they are focused on WMD, can often have much broader applicability. So those are two that jump out at me. There's a huge amount of work that I should say has happened since as well on the nuclear and radiological side. I mentioned in my remarks the work that we have done in Ukraine. And I think this has been incredibly important to support the IAEA with respect to its work in Ukraine on nuclear and radiological security.
Would you mind just saying another word or two about that, specifically Ukraine?
I actually am going to, we actually have Natalie here. I'm going to actually ask Natalie, I'm going to put her on the spot and talk a little bit more, maybe if you wouldn't mind just taking 2 minutes and talking about some of the work that we've been doing to support the IAEA and Ukraine in this area.
This is the best part about being the boss.
Yeah, know who your people are in the audience.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Cindy. I'm Nathalie Sambla. I'm Deputy Director responsible for our nuclear radiological security projects under the Weapons Threat Reduction Program. We have been working in Ukraine for many years. Obviously, most recently, because of the crisis, we've been working directly with the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, supporting their assessment missions at the facilities, specifically the Zaporizhzhia one that is under Russian control currently. We have also worked, though, closely with US DOE, the Nuclear Security Detection and Deterrence Program, and supporting their efforts to equip a lot of the law enforcement and interior security agencies to support them in ensuring that a lot of the material that we think are out of regulatory control are not illicitly trafficked. So, currently, we have $5 million in contributions to US DOE on this, and we're looking to further enhance the capabilities in Ukraine on that issue as well.
Thank you. And she answered that a lot more comprehensively than I could have. I think there was another comment or question here.
Oh, thank you very much. My name is Todd Perry. I'm the Special Coordinator for UNSCR 1540, U.S. Department of State. And I wanted to ask you kind of now the complementary forward-looking question following on Brian's request, which is in this era now of enhanced, or I should say increased strategic competition, and in the evolution of technology, and not to mention kind of the borders or the graying of the borders between countries and state and non-state organizations, I want to ask you the same question that we ask within our Bureau of International Security and Nonproliferation. What are the new tools, what are the new things that Canada is thinking about to prevent acquisition by non-state and state actors, new strategies, new concerns about what could be acquired and to what end? Thank you.
Thanks. I think some of the members of my team can probably talk about that in more depth than I can, and maybe I'll put Trevor, the other big expert here in the room, on the spot in a second. So Trevor, you've got 30 seconds to think about what you're going to say. When you talk about new threats, though, and this is one of the questions I posed, because I think it's really important to continually think about, is your program adapting itself to kind of where the puck is going, as we like to say here in Canada. And, last week, as part of my G7 Sherpa duties, I was in Montreal at the Canadian Internet Governance Forum. Totally different topic, nothing to do with this, maybe. And a lot of the conversation was around artificial intelligence and how it will change the entire landscape. And, there was a little bit of discussion about, how does artificial intelligence change the weapons landscape and the security landscape. And of course, one of the concerns is that artificial intelligence will make it a heck of a lot easier for individuals to build and develop weapons, using their computers rather than a huge team of experts that would have been necessary in the past. So that lowering of the bar in terms of the development of new threats, I think is one of the many concerns out there. I would also say, and I briefly mentioned in my remarks, that intersection between disinformation and weapons, I think, is an area of growing concern for us. And I know that the team is working closely with the G7 Rapid Response Mechanism on the issue of disinformation and its intersection with WMD. So those are just two examples that are personally on my mind. But Trevor, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to respond to that.
Thank you, Cindy, and I won't take 2 minutes because I don't want to give away the rest of the day's agenda, and we will be talking about these very issues. But I think you've touched on two of the most important: artificial intelligence. In the Chemical Security Working Group of the Global Partnership, we heard a few weeks ago from an esteemed scientist who talked about how you could use ChatGPT to plug in questions like, how do I make new chemical weapons out of compounds that haven't been used before? And it gives answers. That's terrifying. Technology that we're using to prevent some of the world's worst diseases. Some of you may be familiar with CRISPR technology, with gene editing. It's wonderful technology. but it's dual-use technology. You can just as easily use those technologies to create new and more deadly biological weapons as you can to use them to create new vaccines. As an international security community, we don't have the answers. There's no hubris here. We don't pretend in the global partnership that we know how to stop this. At the same time, and I think one of the most important things about our program and the global partnership is while we're trying to mitigate future threats, yesterday's, last century's threats are still here. These weapons that we're trying to work against, biological, nuclear, chemical, many of them are more than a century old. What allowed those to be created before computers existed is still a problem. So we're dealing with legacy problems from, in some cases, centuries ago, trying to think how we're going to stop artificial intelligence and next generation threats from coming at us. And this goes to the fundamental point that was made earlier by the Associate Deputy Minister. The global partnership job is not done. The hard work's just starting.
I think that's a great line to close on. Thank you all so much for joining today. I'm really looking forward to hearing about the outcomes of today's discussions. And again, thank you for convening this important event.